Yeah, sorry about the technical glitch that we experienced. We'll try and continue. Now, what I was now trying to do is to explain the autonomic nervous system in terms of our parasympathetic system and our sympathetic nervous system. As alluded to earlier on, we pointed out that our nervous system works together with the endocrine system in order to control the movements of the skeletal muscles. Because muscles, there are basically three types of muscles. You're talking of your smooth muscles, you're talking of your cardiac muscles, that is the walls of your heart, and then you're talking of your skeletal muscles, the skeletal muscles that are responsible for the movement of your skeleton, of your bones. That is why they are called skeletal muscles. So now what I wanted to point out before we go back to what we were dealing with on parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, you realize that the building block of what makes up your peripheral nervous system, the actual nerves. Your nerves, we have earlier on covered, like previously we covered on your cranial nerves. So your nervous system is made up of the cranial nerves, and it's also made by the nerves that originate from your spinal cord and your spinal nerves, I mean. So as you can see, your cranial nerve and your spinal cord, they formulate what is known as the central nervous system. And now going back to our parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, like we have explained in terms of the endocrine system that is regulating your parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic autonomic nervous system is regulated predominantly by the neurotransmitter that is known as acetylcholine. In the same vein, your sympathetic nervous system is regulated, like which exactly, you remember that previously we're touching on our hypothalamus, which is the control center controlling which is actually the interface between your central nervous system, or rather your nervous system, and the endocrine system. Your hypothalamus was controlling your pituitary glands, which are co-controls, which are the gonadotropins, which are other hormones, right, which actually secrete other hormones that controls other glands. So the gland that we are interested in is the adrenal glands, which sits on top of your kidney, and the other term for that is suprarenal gland. So the neurotransmitter of interest that your adrenal gland secretes, there are two. The other one is known as the adrenaline, and the other name for adrenaline, it can actually be called epinephrine. And the other hormone also that works to regulate your sympathetic nervous system is also known norepinephrine. And the function of these two hormones is vaso constriction. So now we have looked into the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous systems in terms of the endocrine system regulating them. But in the same vein, would also love to look into the issues of the nerves that are controlling your parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. So you realize that your parasympathetic nervous system is innervated by interesting nerves, and actually these are found from your cranial nerves, which is something that we looked into that. That was when we dealt with the cranial nerves of your brain, which are 12 of them. But for now, we just want to look into the nerves that regulate our parasympathetic activities. So there are basically 4 of them. We have got your vagus nerve. Speaking of which, your vagus nerves is responsible for the coordination of 95% of your sympathetic nervous system activities. And there's also the oculomotor, the facial, the glossopharyngeal. And now we need to understand how it actually innervates. What areas does it innervate? So, like I alluded to earlier on, we have noticed that our parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for coordination of activities such as rest and digest. And this is very interesting. So I'll try and rub off a bit. Okay, so we are looking into nerves that are responsible, the nerves that are responsible for innervation of your parasympathetic nervous system. You have your vagus nerve. You also have your oculomotor, and you have your facial, and you have your glossopharyngeal nerves. So in other words, you want to know what kind of activities they are innervating. So what is the function of the vagus nerves? You realize that your vagus nerve function is innervation the internal organs that are found within the region of your body that is known as abdominopelvic region. But now we want to know precisely what kind of activities are regulated parasympathetic when someone is resting and digesting. So in other words, digestion has got to do with your stomach, organs such as control of the stomach, of your stomach, your intestines. We're also looking into issues like your vagus nerve is responsible for innervation of your heart rate, your heart rate, your breathing, and what else? Heart rate, breathing, and okay, basically that's about that. We look into how it actually does that. When you look into oculomotor, like what we covered last time, you realize that your oculomotor nerve is the one which is responsible for regulating of eye movements. So in other words, when someone is said to be when your parasympathetic nervous system is kicking, in other words, you're supposed to you're supposed to engage a restful state. So that being the case, as far as your eyes are concerned, we expect for your eyes to be constricted. So your pupil size is constricted, or rather relaxed. It's constricted or relaxed. And that is how your oculomotor, and then your facial nerve, what it does, it's got to do with your taste, your tongue, your taste, eating, and the chewing, mastication, and also your facial expressions. Your glossopharyngeal, like what we covered, like what we covered previously, is got to do with the tongue. So this is about swallowing. It's about your taste, and the pharyngeal from the pharynx has got to do with swallowing. Did I miss out any other fathers? Facial, what? that has got to do with salivating as well. Salivating. And so this is the part of this is what we've covered in terms of the cranial nerves. You realize that the other thing that you do when you are resting and digesting, the part that controls your parasympathetic, the other part or other section of your nervous system in terms of the nerves that control the parasympathetic is the sacral, and you are referring specifically to your S2 to S4. And what are we controlling? We are controlling our bladder. We are controlling our bladder for urine release. At the same time, we're also controlling less of our GIT tract. Unfortunately, I don't have space to write, but we're also controlling the parasympathetic, to some extent, the GI tract part of it, in order for passing out of feces. This is what you do when you are resting and digesting. Okay, so we have covered the parts of your cranial nerves and the nerves that are responsible for mediation of your parasympathetic system. Then we move on to a sympathetic nervous system. The other term, how do you distinguish your parasympathetic system from your sympathetic nervous system? You realize that the distinction can be explained in terms of the function of the nerves, what your nerves or the region of the nerves that are innervating the muscles pertaining to the parasympathetic action that will be, rather any action activity that will be in question. So like what we have realized, we've listed out that as far as the parasympathetic is concerned, it is innervated by these four cranial nerves and also the sacral part of a spinal cord. And so in other words, the other name for the parasympathetic system in terms of the nerves that innervates it is called craniosacral nerves. So it is innervated by the craniosacral nerves. So each time you hear the word parasympathetic mentioned, think in terms of the nerves that are involved in the innervation of that autonomic function. It involves your craniosacral, meaning part of the cranial nerves, and also the sacral, that is your CS2 to S4, which deals with the control of your bladder and a part of your GI tract as far as the function of excretion is concerned. Now that we have covered our parasympathetic system, we also move into your sympathetic nervous system. Like what we said, your sympathetic nervous system can be seen as your fear and flight system. So fear and flight system, like what we said the other time, these two, they sort of cancel each other out. Last time we have seen that when a person is as far as the parasympathetic is concerned, the neurotransmitter concerned is acetylcholine, and then we've also seen that as far as the sympathetic nervous system is concerned, we're dealing with adrenaline, or that what we call epinephrine. And what we now want to look into is the terms of the nerves that we are dealing with. And we had identified the activities that are carried out under parasympathetic. That was rest and digest. But now is the opposite of that, like they cancel each other. We are talking of fear and flight. So maybe if we begin off by the way, I had forgotten to say that the oculomotor refers to your control of your eyes. I trust I mentioned that, I should have. That is the constriction of your of your eyes. Now let's say that in a situation whereby like the key thing to know about the relationship between, maybe at another point you might be asked to outline or to point out the similarities that are found between your somatic system and your autonomic nervous system. The right component, or rather the right pathway that identifies the difference between the two is your the similarity between the two is your somatic system and your sympathetic function of your autonomic nervous system. What your sympathetic nervous system does, which is identifies it to the somatic nervous system, is that all these two systems are defined by external stimuli. You need external stimuli in order for it to kick in. So in other words, with this, in the event that you see something fearful, what happens? Something that you are afraid of. You have triggered a fear and flight response. The first thing that you are going to mention is your eye. Your eye are going to dilate, and for that functionality, part of your what controls that? What kind of nerves controls that? You have got nerves from the thoracic region and the lumbar region that are involved in the innervation of the muscles that will result in an emergency, that is triggering of the fear and flight function. So now we are looking into the eye. What happens when your eye dilates is you have your pupil dilates, and the other activities that identify anti-sympathetic is digestion has to cease. And when we have adrenaline, it constricts vessels leading to a state which is known as vaso constriction, and when that happens, it means that it results in triggering the heart rate. The heart rate increases, and as a result of there's dilation. There's dilation of your bronchi. That is, you take in more oxygen. And what else do we have? And vasoconstriction, and then it also controls respiration. We've touched on the issue of respiration. We have touched on breathing. Respiration rate increases. What is the other thing? It also increases your perspiration. What are the other activities that are triggered under okay, that's all right. I think that's about that as far as the explanation of how the parasympathetic and the nervous system operates. To the annals. So when we are saying that your sympathetic nervous system inhibits motility, in other words, it is working against the effect of peristalsis, because we do not want any digestion to be going on in the times of emergency. We want our energy to be channeled to the organs to release ATP that we need to do work in response of the harmful situation that you would have been faced with. And then we move on to the parasympathetic system, and there's actually sort of an if you call it a mnemonic that helps you to remember the activities that are coordinated by your parasympathetic system. You can call it SS load or SS LAD. And your first S denotes sexual activity. Your second S speaks of salivation, and your L speak of lacrimation. And whenever you hear of the lacrimation, it means tears. Remember the lacrimal gland and the lacrimal bone. And then we move on to U speaks of urination, and then D speaks of digestion, and the other D speaks of your defecation. You remember we said that this part, your the U and D is innervated by the sacral, by the nerves that are found on the sacral, that is specifically S2 to S4, and this has got to do, we have highlighted that it has got to do with the control of your blood and also release of your defecation. So this has got to do with the which has got to do with your dissenting colon, rectum, in order to release the feces that it holds. So that's about it as far as the peripheral nervous system is concerned. But maybe before we put a lid on that, we'd love to see how your parasympathetic system and your nervous system works in terms of digestion. So you realize that, and maybe trying to tie this to like what this works outside of the enteric system. We have seen that it works outside the role of your central nervous system, but now we're looking at digestive system as far as the with the involvement of your central nervous system. So you realize that initially digestion kickstarts as a result of the detection of smell or taste. And now what we need to understand is which particular nerve is responsible for the innervation of that of the sense of smell and taste. You realize that we were speaking to the glossopharyngeal nerves is the one that innervates that. And once that happens, not only about smell, taste, that is we're talking of movement, swallowing, in terms of the swallowing. And now what we want, it also has got to do with motility, that is peristalsis, the movement of your food item, down your GIT tract. I'm trying to see that I won't leave anything that has to be taken into consideration. So you know that the sense of smell is actually transduced by your parasympathetic nervous system, and I already mentioned that. Let me see if there's anything that I have left out. And then your parasympathetic actually, which is involved in digestion, and mainly it is via the cranial nerve called the vagus nerves. And we have already alluded to what the vagus nerve does as far as the parasympathetic system is concerned, but maybe you may want to put that into consideration. We are talking of control of your digestive centers, such as your stomach, because it's digestion, and those organs, does it control it controls the stomach, it also controls your kidneys, It also controls the spleen and quite a number of accessory organs that deal with the digestion. And the other thing that your parasympathetic does is the stimulation of acid production in your stomach, and that is your vagus nerve that controls that. And the other digestive accessory organ that I had forgotten is the pancreas. And so this is the vagus efferent nerve that does with the innervation of all those centers as far as regulation of the GIT is concerned. Let me see from my notes if there is anything that is or that is left out. We have alluded to the fact that with the release of your what do you call it? The release of with the release of the neurotransmitter that you call adrenaline, which is also known as epinephrine, it results in the constriction of blood vessels. And why is that important as far as the GIT is concerned? It is important because it results in less perfusion of blood to the intestines. Because we don't want digestion to take place, so less perfusion of blood to the intestines, and it's channeled to the other organs in response to the fear and flight situation that we are faced with. And that's about it as for. And how does this enteric system controls regulate the autonomic nervous system outside of the central nervous system? Of course, it's supposed to, it works with mechanoreceptors, it works with chemoreceptors, it also works with osmoreceptors that sense. Mechanoreceptors respond in the presence of food. Chemoreceptors is a response to dictates. These are receptors that detect changes in the chemical composition of your GIT in response to the secretion of gastric juices that aid in your digestion, and that can intrinsically control your autonomic nervous system outside the aid of your central nervous system, that is your brain and your spinal cord. That is how it works. So I believe that now we have managed to appreciate how our peripheral nervous system works in depthly, and the kind of activities that it coordinates, and the relationship that exists between our peripheral nervous system and the nervous system, and our peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. We have said that this central nervous system is actually the control center, with our peripheral system acting as the front line. So that's about it as far as our peripheral nervous system is concerned. We'll meet again as we look into the central nervous system, that is, as we cover the spinal cord and the brain in detail. Good night. So what we are now looking into is the conclusion of the study of our nervous system, and particularly we're looking into our peripheral nervous system, and as we have identified previously, our peripheral nervous system is defined by two pathways. Talk of your somatic nervous system and your autonomic nervous system. And maybe as a recap, we can recall that our somatic nervous system deals with which part of the muscles. It's about external, and then your autonomic talks of internal. And what do we refer to as external? The external are dealing with muscles that regulate voluntary activities. Those are we find on the skeletal. We're talking of your skeletal muscles. We are talking of your skin, and we're also talking of the sense organs that are found on your body, on your skin. And then looking into internal organs, we have noted that your autonomic nervous system deals with the innervation of your internal organs that deals with involuntary activity. Like you can actually define as your autonomic nervous system as involuntary, with the exception of breathing, which is not involuntary. You can decide when to breathe. Like right now, what I can actually do is I've held my breath. I can actually make a conscious decision to hold my breath. So in other words, as far as internal functions such as breathing by those organs that are found internal, the activity of breathing is actually something that is voluntary, so with the exception of your breathing and also sexual arousal, which is something that you decide on. So now, having defined that, I remember I explained previously that our peripheral nervous system is actually defined by 3 systems, but the other one we didn't list it previously. And now what we're going to do is just to look into it, just to have an overview of what the peripheral nervous system, this full spectrum, what it involves. So it involves your enteric nervous system, and this system deals with the control of your GTI behavior, and that is outside the influence of your central nervous system. And then we have also looked into your sympathetic nervous system, and now we just sort of listed what it deals with. Your sympathetic nervous system, it deals with the increase of your heart rate, it deals with your breathing, it deals with your perspiration, that is sweating, it deals with the dilation of your pupil, and it deals with inhibits motility. Motility is the movement of your GIT. So you see that your GIT tract, you can say it starts from